Resident Evil 8 Village, a novelization. Part 1. The nightmare. Always a nightmare. Always followed by the rushing feeling of relief upon realizing it was just a dream. Relief, and on this particular occasion, confusion as well. Ethan Winters awoke from his recurring nightmare due to the crying baby he had snuggled safely on his chest. Rose. His sweet little Rose. His pride and joy. He must have dozed off while holding her on the couch. The exhausted father had attempted to rock his daughter to sleep in his arms, but it seems Ethan was the one that was in need of a nap. He couldn't have been dozed off more than 5 minutes or so before the fuzzy little baby girl, dressed in pink knit pajamas, realized her daddy wasn't paying attention to her anymore and began to cry in a successful attempt to wake him up. "Sorry, honey. I guess Daddy was a lot more tired than he let on," Ethan said softly to his child as he resumed to rock her once again. "Did you say something, Ethan?" A soft female voice called out from the kitchen towards the living room where Ethan and Rose were sitting. It was his wife, Mia, the love of his life, a woman he would, and indeed has, traveled to hell and back to protect. Mia also had nightmares, and Ethan had no doubts that hers were far worse than his. He could hear the degrading effects of these nightmares in her once sweet voice. Once sweet and optimistic, once youthful tone had gradually taken on a cadence of a woman who had endured unspeakable horrors for years on end, which she no doubt had. However, tonight her voice sounded worse than it had in a while. All day she had been short with him. She seemed to be entirely focused on Rose, without fail, while keeping Ethan at arm's length. He found, though, it was often best to give his wife space when she was in a mood. "No, yeah. I was talking to Rose. I guess I must have fallen asleep for a minute." Ethan raised his voice just enough so it would carry across the house to where Mia was preparing dinner. "That's very irresponsible, to fall asleep before your baby. Babies are naturally drawn to danger," Mia informed him as she walked into the living room holding some sort of large book. "Right, yeah, of course, I didn't realize I was so tired," Ethan admitted. Mia sat next to her husband and daughter on the couch. Rose's eyes lit up at the sight of her mother's face. She picked up her baby out of Ethan's arms and snuggled her, sitting upright, so Rose could see the big black storybook that she held up with her other hand. "I got this in town today," Mia explained before continuing. "It's a traditional fairy tale in these parts." "You seem to be acclimating to our new home very well," Ethan praised his wife. "That sure doesn't look like a children's book, though." The book was dirty, bound in black velvet, and as large as a photo album, no doubt just as heavy. The title, surprisingly in perfect English, read Village of Shadows. Why would it be in English? He pondered to himself. Actually, now that he was thinking about it, a lot of the locals spoke English fluently, even when speaking amongst themselves on the street. He wondered why this little isolated mountain town in Romania, of all places, would almost exclusively speak a foreign language like English. He made a point to remember that question and to bring it up with Chris next time he visited for a briefing. All these thoughts he kept to himself as Mia opened the storybook up and began to read aloud to Rose. Long ago, a young girl went with her mother to pick berries for her father, who was hard at work. But the forest greeted them with a dark, cold silence, the bushes empty. Yet, determined to find berries, the rascal broke free from her mother's grasp and vanished into the trees. Mother's worried cries faded fast as the girl ran over vine, under branch, and into the forest deep. Feeling strange eyes upon her, the girl recalled Mother's scary bedtime tales, and her throat became bone dry. Then the Bat Lord appeared. He greeted her warmly and bit his own wing. "Come, child, quench your thirst," he said. So she drank the thick, dark blood and smiled with joy. Passing through a graveyard, menacing storm clouds loomed, and in the air turned bitingly cold. The girl was shivering in her thin clothes. Then a dark weaver appeared, and with the click of his fingers, crafted mist into a beautiful dress. "Come, child, warm yourself," he coaxed. So she clothed herself and smiled with joy. Across waters deep and ominous she went, hoping the boat she found would carry her home. But hunger's grip tightened and her heart grew heavy. Then the Fish King appeared and offered one of his many fins. "Come, child, eat your fill." So the girl ate and smiled with joy once more. Continuing on, she soon entered the forest's dark heart. Then an iron steed appeared, bearing a beautiful golden gear. The creature said nothing as the girl approached, and snatched what she thought was another gift. The horse grew angry and summoned the other monsters. Terror had filled the girl's heart once again as a wild wind rose about the beasts. Suddenly, a witch appeared, dark yet regal. "Gifts we gave, but more you took," she snarled. "So more in turn is due." In the blink, the girl was trapped inside a mirror. Her parents, though, had been searching all day and at last had arrived. With rampant rage, father fought the witch while mother's loving touch shattered the dark enchantment. But the witch was strong, and father yelled, "Save our daughter!" So mother bore their children to safety as the forest was consumed. Even now, the burnt forest is a grim reminder of father's sacrifice. To this day, any child who stares too long into the charred wasteland will be haunted by nightmares of getting lost while picking berries.
What is with the creepy story? She's only 6 months old, Ethan asked, with a slight hint of anger in his voice. It was bad enough that he and Mia had nightmares every time they fell asleep, but why should their infant daughter as well? He would have thought his wife would agree with him on this point, but her eyes, staring daggers into him at the moment, told him otherwise. He had seen that fire in her eyes before, and it was never a good thing. Then, as quickly as the fire started, it disappeared, and Mia was now smiling sweetly, shaking her head. "Rose doesn't seem to mind," she said sweetly. "Thank God. We moved here to get away from all that scary stuff, remember?" Ethan knew he was entering dangerous waters. Mia politely dismissed Ethan's concerns. "There's nothing wrong with my memory. You're just being paranoid." "I'm not paranoid. I'm just being cautious," he said, rather unsure of himself. "Well then, go cautiously, take your daughter up to bed, and I'll finish dinner." Mia passed Rose back into her father's arms and then headed back into the kitchen. Ethan turned the corner from the living room to the staircase when his little girl finally looking like she was as tired as he himself was just a few moments ago. Rose stirred slightly as he took the first couple steps. He stopped to cuddle her for just a moment. There. It's like I told your mother. That book is too scary for you," he whispered softly to Rose before continuing upstairs. "Did you say something?" Mia called out from the kitchen once again. Nothing. I'll put her down," he replied sheepishly, shocked Mia was able to hear him at this distance. He made a left at the top of the staircase, then headed towards the master bedroom. Both Ethan and Mia liked to keep Rose close to them while they slept. Rose's cradle sat just feet away from their bed. Ethan kissed his daughter goodnight and assured her that she was safe from all the scary storybook monsters her mother had told her about. He began pacing around the upstairs of their new home. The house was still in a bit of disarray, with open moving boxes strewn about. They hadn't even had time to fix up what would become Rose's bedroom across the hall. Everything had happened so fast after Chris Redfield and the BSAA team rescued himself and Mia from the horrors of that farmhouse in Dovey, Louisiana. Ethan still disliked thinking about what had brought him from his apartment in Houston, Texas, to that desolate Louisiana marsh. Back in 2013, Ethan was an average guy that worked in IT for a company that consistently undervalued him. Despite being unsatisfied with his job, he was very lucky when it came to his love life. He had met Mia just 2 years prior at an office Christmas party. They both seemed to have an immediate attraction for one another and hit it off right away. By the summer of 2013, after just a year and a half of dating, they were married. A beautiful, happy young couple just beginning their lives together. Ethan had never been so happy. But sadly, the joy wasn't to last much longer. What Ethan didn't know about Mia, what no one knew about Mia, is that she secretly worked for a clandestine bioengineering company. The kind of company that operates exclusively in the shadows. A company that secretly created unholy monstrosities capable of wiping out massive amounts of human lives should they ever escape. Which, of course, is exactly what happened in the beginning of 2014. Mia often had to travel for work. It was part of her job, or so she told everyone. The loving couple kissed each other goodbye, neither having any way of knowing this would be the last time they would see each other for over 3 years. 2 days after Mia left, Ethan was eating his lunch in the employee break room. With his laptop open in front of him, he had just taken a large bite of a questionable-looking Reuben sandwich he purchased from the cafeteria when a notification dinged on his computer screen. It was a new video message from Mia. He clicked eagerly and watched his wife's bubbly and sweet message. He missed her already. Only a few more days and she would be back home, she said. When 4 days had gone by with no word from Mia, he rightfully became a little nervous, but it was only by 1 day. Could be her flight was snowed in, or her phone had died, he reassured himself. By the 3rd day she was overdue, however. He was in full panic mode. No one had heard from her. Neither her parents or best friend had heard from her at all on this trip. It wasn't until the police showed up for Ethan to report a missing persons case that things became much worse. Much worse. The police began their investigation by contacting the company Mia worked for. The company, however, had no record of a Mia Winters whatsoever, nor did they have any employees that ever traveled for business purposes. Ethan's wife had virtually just vanished, and no one had any clue where she could be or what could have happened. Mia's family were inconsolable. Ethan was in shock. The more the police investigated the case, the more frustrating the situation became. Finally, the FBI was brought in after Mia's disappearance had made national news. Her story gathered a modest amount of media attention due to its cryptic nature. Theories ranged from sex trafficking to shape-shifting reptilian aliens. The FBI was able to find the only lead in the entire case before throwing up their hands in frustration. A CCTV camera at a convenience store seemed to show a woman who had appeared to be Mia Winters holding hands with a young girl with black hair.
They were accompanied by an unidentified man in his mid-30s that Mia seemed to be familiar with based on body language. The three of them got into a black SUV and drove away. Despite hundreds of man-hours, that, as far as the case went, there was no other CCTV footage, clues, and no hope. By the second year anniversary of her disappearance, the only person still working the case was a private investigator hired by Mia's parents. They continued to pay him every week, despite his willingness to admit that he was not likely to ever discover any clues that the FBI couldn't find. Every Friday, the PI would make a phone call to both Ethan and Mia's father, and every Friday, the news was disheartening, and it was the same, which was there was no news at all. By the third year of Mia's absence, Ethan had finally begun to accept the situation and move forward with his life. Mia's parents began to encourage him to do so as well, which he reluctantly started to do. He began to allow himself to have a social life once again. For the first time in over 3 years, Ethan awoke one morning in a healthy, optimistic mood. He poured his morning coffee and sat down at his computer to check his email. And that's when he saw it. A message from a name he never expected to see again. Mia. He had received a new message from Mia at some point during the night while he slept. The email had a video message attached to it. With bated breath and a pounding heart, he clicked play. It was Mia. Dirty, hysterical, emaciated, and clearly in immediate danger. The message was brief, yet nonetheless it hinted at a terrifying story that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "Stay away," she pleaded. "Stay away." Ethan sat for a long while replaying the video, his mind racing. And what should he do? Call the police, of course, and he would do that, but not before he got a head start. He traced the IP address to somewhere near a town in Louisiana called Dovey, an extremely rural area of swampland near the Gulf Coast. Satellite maps didn't reveal much of anything. Dense forest, marshlands for hundreds of square miles. The closest interstate highway to Dovey was over an hour's drive away. The middle of nowhere. It was a 7-hour drive from Houston to Dovey. Ethan made it there in full. What followed was a night filled with the most macabre sights ever to be witnessed by mankind, or so Ethan would have thought at the time. It wasn't until his friendship with Chris Redfield that he was made privy to the other outbreaks of BOWs that have happened across the world over the past 20 years or so. He even remembered hearing about the Raccoon City incident back when he was a kid, an entire city vaporized in an instant. And now, all these years later, Ethan was one of just a handful of people throughout the world that knew exactly what really happened back in 1998. Ethan had to suddenly stop himself. Too often he would start thinking about Dovey and become stuck in his own head, reliving it in an excruciating detail each time, not realizing he had been zoned out for minutes at a time until someone would come along and shake him out of it. PTSD. He had always heard about it, but now it was just a part of his reality. He made his way back downstairs into the kitchen where Mia was, just finishing up dinner. Mia had painstakingly trying to cook a traditional meal of the area all day. It smelled amazing, and Ethan attempted to scoop a bit with his finger for a taste. Mia quickly smacked his hand away. "Local tales, local cuisine, local wine?" Ethan started. "You're going full native." Ethan and Mia made their way to the dining table. Ethan sat while Mia stood and filled their glasses. "You worry too much, Ethan," Mia insisted. "I know, it's just everything has happened so fast. Finding you in Louisiana, the pregnancy, the military training, Chris moving us halfway across the world." "Well, at least we're all together, right?" She interrupted him. "You seriously think we can just forget everything that happened back in Louisiana?" Ethan demanded to know. "It all happened so long ago. I don't understand why you're so..." Suddenly, Mia was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass and a bullet ripping into her chest. The couple exchanged a brief glimpse of disbelief before the horror of the situation dawned on them both. In the next instant, as more bullets started riddling
the front windows, as well as Mia's body. "Mia, get down!" Ethan screamed, as attempted to reach across the table. Ethan hit the floor just seconds before Mia fell lifelessly, covered in blood. As soon as he started to crawl towards her, a squad of heavily armed PMCs came bursting into the windowsill with assault rifles drawn. Mia was gasping for air, blood bubbling from her mouth. Ethan slowly turned his gaze upwards to the soldiers closing in. He never expected to see that face among them, though. "Mia, oh my God. Wait. Chris? What the hell?" Ethan screamed in disbelief at the man he had assumed was his friend, a man he swore to protect him and his family. "Sorry, Ethan," Chris said coldly, as he trained his silenced pistol down on Mia's face and put 5 more rounds into her skull. "Why?" Ethan pleaded. He received no answer. Chris barked orders at the men around him and ignored Ethan. Just then a soldier came down the stairs holding Rose in his arms. "Package secure, sir." "What the hell are you doing with my daughter? I say get your hands off of her!" My father's rage exploded out of Ethan's mouth, but his body was being restrained by 2 of Chris's men. The 2 men spun Ethan around, while a third used the butt of his rifle to knock Ethan out cold. His vision faded to black as he heard the cries of his daughter ring through his ears.